The Long Way Home. =RK equals. Part 8. =RK equals. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. Queen Niatni met us at one of the balconies overlooking the valley stretching below Theed. The first time I visited this place, the vista below was breathtakingly beautiful. Now? The crash-landed Lakri Hulk-dominated a pockmarked, battle-ravaged valley that had more in common with a lunar landscape than the lush green place of relaxation I remembered. Naboo will never be the same again. The Queen sighed. She was right. On my way down from orbit, I could see it with my own eyes. The space above the planet was cluttered with a terrible amount of wrecks, many of which were close enough to Naboo to be caught by its gravity. Right now there were whole cruiser divisions above us doing their best to either tractor away or blow up the hulks before more of them could slam into the planet. In contrast to the previous battles for Naboo, this one was of particular high intensity, not to mention viciousness. My shuttle had to slowly maneuver through an expanding ring of debris and floating frozen bodies clumped together. Space was big and it was seldom you could see such conglomerations. Battles tended to stretch over large parts of empty real estate, and the same was true for the wreckage they left behind. However, during particularly vicious fights above planetary bodies, this time around there was no one to spare to keep wrecked ships from hitting the planet. Broken hulks, both ours and separatists, had rained down for hours. Whole cities were wiped out or had to be evacuated due to radiation, all the toxic stuff thrown by burning wreckage or the dust and debris clouds thrown by more or less intact ships that slammed just far enough not to wipe them out with the direct after effects of the impact. Naboo used to be a beautiful verdant orb when looked at from space. On my way down, whole continents were covered by spreading clouds of dust and smoke. No. However, your world and people will survive, I stated with a conviction I didn't feel. If the Sis came calling again, Naboo was criffed. I didn't plan to hang around for such an eventuality. Why do I have trouble believing that, General? The monarch turned to look at me. Despite the mask painted over her face, I could clearly see her distress. You should convince yourself then, otherwise you'll find it even harder doing so to your people, and they will need that confidence. Naboo was a vital member of the Mid-Rim Alliance for a simple reason: a lot of the locals trusted them. You could say that besides self-interest, they were the glue holding everything together. As long as she lived, I needed the Queen to keep her chin up and keep holding firm no matter what the Sis threw her way. That's easy to say. How can I? Niatni waved at the valley below. Because someone has to, Your Majesty, and you're the Queen, I stated bluntly. You've told me all about some of the more radical elements trying to use the situation to claw their ways into more power. If you show any weakness, you will make it easier for them, I continued. While I would find it easier to work with some of the more radical voices who were in the rise in Naboo politics, the same couldn't be said about a lot of other Alliance members. For the time being, the Queen was too useful a mediator to even think about replacing her. That's rich, coming from a Sith, Niatni chuckled mirthlessly. There were occasions when this Sith actually was stuck ruling worlds or even a few systems. If you lose people's confidence, your palpable options decrease exponentially. As you say, I'm a Sith. I had no qualms keeping order by any means necessary when I had to. It weighted not my conscience. The same isn't true for you, Your Majesty, and as far as I understand the situation, you would prefer to become a tyrant than see what some of your loudest detractors would turn Naboo into if they seize power. How do you know all that? The Queen turned to glare at me. I have my ways, my lady. While there were a few intelligence agents who seemed loyal and did report what they saw, I did talk with Tigelinus before getting down. He had spent months at Naboo and had the place's pulse well in hand. Not to mention that I finally found Veers when I landed. He was in charge of a tank platoon guarding the main entrance of the palace, and I did stop to grill him about what he did when he got himself lost after Geonosis, as well as what he had learned about Naboo while apparently stuck here. I left him just a few minutes ago with orders to report to my shuttle ready to leave with me. I wasn't leaving him back here in case the Sis did come in force. Niatni's shoulders slumped. You're right, damn you. Left to their own devices, too many people would rather see me replaced with a military junta. They see all this, she pointed at the devastation outside, as my fault. I didn't point out aloud that they were at least partially true. However, no ruler of Naboo operates in a vacuum. As I understand it, even after the Federation invasion of a decade ago, there weren't enough people on board with Naboo creating a proper military. You did your best after Blue Shadow, however there simply wasn't enough time to do more, I said in a soothing tone. I didn't need her falling apart or trusting me even less than she usually did. It wasn't enough, Nietni snapped. Millions of my people are dead with more to follow. Tens of millions need new homes and will suffer long-term effects of all the radiation and toxins released by crashing ships. My world is ruined, she shouted. Good. Letting it out of her system might actually help. It can be rebuilt. Naboo can again be a verdant paradise. It will take time, resources and a lot of hard work, but it is very much doable. Case of point, Tarsis. The place had more or less recovered by the time of the Cold War between the Old Republic and the Sith Empire. I've been there and I've seen records of the devastation that Revan's apprentice left in his wake. Compared to that, Naboo was barely scratched. I wisely didn't mention any of that to the Queen. The last thing any of us needed was me pointing out that as often as not we Sith tended to wreck planets when we got serious about war. Or just for the kicks. We hope you're right, General. Nietni composed herself and was back to using her royal voice. That's not why we requested your presence. There are 2 points we need to discuss. First Sullust and second, your intentions. What about Sullust, Your Majesty? I faked confusion. I did what I said I intended to do when I got there, wreck as much of their industry as possible, steal as many supplies as my fleet could recover and neutralize as many of the separatist mobile forces in system as practical. While our losses were higher than I'm comfortable with, we virtually achieved all our objectives there. Nietni gave me a withering look. If glares could kill, and I've seen it happen, by all means I should have been reduced to a smoking pile of ash. You know what we are talking about. The Queen snapped. Is it the gas giant or the moons? I asked innocently. Both, damn you. Her composure was gone again. Those moons and the people on them were already dead, no matter if we reduced them in a more conventional manner or not. To speak bluntly, Your Majesty, killing as many of the skilled workers there as possible was a secondary aim. Doing so ensured that the enemy couldn't use them to rebuild or at other industrial and mining centers. The stunt with the Freedom and the gas giant merely ensured that we got a use of an asset we would have had to abandon and destroy ourselves, not to mention it saved us a lot of ammunition, which considering what happened here today should be enough of a clue why I deemed that a good idea. That's monstrous. Nietni recoiled. By any reasonable definition of the word, I am a monster, Your Majesty. Luckily for you and the Republic, I am your monster. As far as my intentions go, once we've straightened up the situation in orbit, I'll be leaving for the Republic proper with as many ships as practical. On the way there we'll hit targets of opportunity and hopefully help keep the enemy's attention away from the Alliance for long enough for you to rebuild a decent defense force or for the GAR to break out of the core and reinforce this region. I explained in a very rough detail my plans. =RK equals. Part 9. =RK equals. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. A few minutes of trying to persuade the Queen that I wasn't a monster on the loose, but one who knew what was doing and had her and her people's best interests at hand, for admittedly selfish reasons centered around mine and the Mandalorian people's best long-term interests. The other people we were waiting for arrived. Tarkin, very much alive, not surprising considering he hadn't even thought of using his own flag to ram the enemy with. Behind him walked the hegemon, Mario Fanetti, one of the few reasonable politicians gathered on Naboo. Beside him entered Rintone's ambassador, whose name I misplaced, again. The small group was rounded by a few of the Queen's advisors who chatted amiably with Senator Bob Devinian from Neuralee. That was a very curious gathering we were going to have. The people who just came to the balcony had no illusions the kind of alliance we had, and there shouldn't be division across ideological lines, at least at this meeting. It was going to be all realpolitik, and I didn't envy whoever had to sell what was decided here on their more ideologically inflexible colleagues. For all their dangers, politics back in the Empire had an elegant simplicity compared to what the poor bastards in the Republic had to deal with. Your Majesty, what's your verdict? Is our resident Sith sane enough to work with? The hegemon proved why I liked him most of this bunch and cut right to the heart of the matter. Nietni frowned at Fanetti, who gave her a roguish smile in response. You continue to be uncouth, hegemon. She followed with an impressive sneer of derision that slid over the man's thick skin without doing any damage to his ego. To answer your question, we're still on. Well, that's good. I'm glad things don't have to get unpleasant. He nodded genially in my direction. I wondered if they had a concept how unpleasant I could make things for them in the fullness of time if they tried to stab me in the back after I wasted so much time and material in an attempt to keep their world safe. I could be as petty and vindictive as the worst of the Sith if I had a good enough reason. Or did they expect that I would be gunning for them just for the hell of it after Celeste or something? I actually asked that aloud and everyone looked uneasy at each other in response. Really? I shook my head. You take a few military targets and people think you've gone insane. What was wrong with these people, damn it? You ignited a gas giant, blew up, set on fire or otherwise wrecked about 30 or so moons. Perhaps more. The senator pointed out in what he thought was a reasonable argument. My engineers actually were in a favor of taking the time and resources needed to create an artificial black hole and use that instead, until I set them right. They're Corellian and didn't have any interactions with me prior to Celeste, I gleefully explained to everyone's consternation. I'm surprised you didn't go for that idea, Fanetti admitted. If I wanted Celeste, the planet, wrecked, I would have found a way to do it. That, however, would have been an uncalled for escalation at this point of time. Perhaps if the Separatists lose it completely and begin burning worlds again or break open something as nasty as the Blue Shadow. Again. They were acting as if the enemy didn't escalate to the nasty stuff before us and I was out to wreck worlds, moons, for the fun. For the record, it was damn fun, but that was beside the point. I agree with the general. Tarkin finally opened his mouth, the troublemaker. All things considered, he did show remarkable restraint, for a Sith. That was either a backhand compliment or a thinly veiled insult. I wasn't sure how he intended it, the bastard, perhaps neither was he. That's rich coming from you, Fanetti chuckled, then his face became serious. The Admiral here tells me we lost most of the fleet. We did. I nodded. Only preliminary reports were available, but they were just a handful of fully operational ships from the force commanded by Tarkin and Tigelinas. However, those ships were well spent. It will take time to crack the data cores of the ships the Separatists surrendered. The same goes for interrogating their organic commanders, but it looks like today we broke the back of the enemy presence in this whole region of space. They no longer have the local forces to threaten the Alliance. The Confederacy at large does have such assets, Senator Divinian said. They do, and if they actually bother to deal with us, there was nothing we could have done even before the campaign we undertook to keep your world safe. The truth is that for the time being the Alliance isn't going to be a significant threat. You'll need time to rebuild your defenses and fleets before you can even think about any offensive operations. At the same time, I'll be moving on towards the core and try to focus the enemy's attention on myself. That actually wasn't an outright lie. If we found any juicy soft targets while we made our way home, we were going to hit them and made ourselves scarce before the CIS could muster an overwhelming response. Do you really need to? Asked the hegemon. Wouldn't the forces you'll need be better served keeping us safe? That wouldn't better serve the Republic at large, and without help from the core the Alliance is likely doomed. While you do have the resources to build up more industry and then fleets, if the Separatists win the war in the next few years, you simply won't be able to create and man a large enough fleet. Besides, as far as ships go, there are some perfectly good Confederacy ones in orbit. The big issue there is going to be manpower and finding out any nasty surprises they've left behind. We aren't exactly leaving you defenseless by stripping everything that can fly and fight. In fact, I didn't want to take too big a fleet with me. Doing so would make us a threat that the CIS would have no choice but eliminate. It's good to hear that the Republic doesn't intend to abandon us. Again, Fanetti jabbed. We certainly wouldn't have done that if we had an acceptable alternative. Naboo wasn't the only one particularly pacifistically inclined world. Even with the clone army, it was a miracle the enemy didn't win before the Republic could recover and begin shifting industries towards war footing. They almost did anyway, despite the Sith and corrupt leadership using the war as a distraction before it took a life on its own. Once the Confederate Council took power and stopped playing around, they came awfully close to winning. How close exactly I would learn only when I got back to Coruscant and had a chat with Obi-Wan. To stress that point, I'll be leaving Admiral Tarkin around as a liaison between the Republic and the Alliance. You, my friend, will be also in charge of all GAR assets in this whole Western Galactic Quadrant. Not to mention, you'll have to deal with the politics of the Alliance you had me sign on off and support. Good luck with that, you'll need it. That's one concern addressed, General. We have others. Niatni let out a quiet sigh of relief. I'm all ears. We discussed the military situation, the odds of the Sis throwing an armada or two in to kill everyone and what to do if the worst didn't happen. Only then we were back to the politics of our alliance, which were going to be even more fascinating. Frankly, while a part of me couldn't believe these people's reactions over my actions at Sullust, there was another that marveled that there wasn't more fallout. It was only now that I was listening to the people gathered on the balcony that it dawned on me, Satine's declaration that reached more or less the whole galaxy. My sister-in-law was the new chancellor. My brother-in-law was the commanding general of the GAR, and both of them were Mandalorians. I was Mandalore. To make it all better, most politicians who gathered at Naboo along with what forces they could scrape, did so to gain goodwill and favors with Palpi, the previous chancellor, by officially trying their best to protect his homeworld and not so officially running when overwhelming Sis forces came knocking at their own homes. You know, I won't be here for long. A day, perhaps 2 at the longest, and I'm leaving. So please say your pieces plainly. I interrupted a long-winded speech by Senator Divinian that was heavy on flowery expressions and very light on substance. The hegemon laughed at the poleaxed expression of his colleague. What Bog is trying to say is that he wants a reassurance that his world's interests will be protected when we re-establish contact with the Republic. He would also like to continue to represent his people in the Senate. We understand that there had been some spectacular upheaval on Coruscant and that you might not be in a position to stick to any specific promises before actually getting there and figuring out what is happening. Finetti smiled. In fact, we're all hoping that there will be some major changes in the future, positive ones. That's what we are all striving for, Hegemon. However, it's as you said. I may make any and all promises here and now, but before any of us knows what exactly happened at Coruscant and the core. I trailed off. What I can do is listen to your concern and ensure that they're heard by Chancellor Satine. She will see their importance. The question is what real power she can wield and what she can actually do about them, and that's something I can't even speculate about at this time. In other words, in the end it might be more of the usual. Divinian grumbled. Not necessary. I smiled, and it was even genuine this time. I caught Tarkin's eyes with my own and he nodded. Wilhuff and Ariadu were behind changing the Republic into something that would better serve our interests. The same was true for his allies. Now it was time to see how well did he prepare the soil here for any such ideas. What do you have in mind? Divinian asked. Why, precisely what you came to Naboo in the first place. I'll facilitate a deal between you and the Chancellor. She might need the support of all the allies she can get to make sure your interests are addressed to a satisfactory degree. While right now Satine might not be in a position to do much to help the Alliance, and I'm not talking about the pesky separatist problem we all have, we can eventually make it so that she can. The General is correct. Tarkin added. None of us were blind about how the core treated most of the Rim words. As loath I am to suggest it, some Sis members do have legitimate grievances, some of which many of us share. For all the suffering and destruction this war has caused, it also offers us an opportunity to address grievances that we couldn't even hope to have resolved before. For too long we have been bound to the Republic in a relationship that almost exclusively benefited the core. While a few of our worlds did do all right for themselves, the vast majority of the Western Quadrant is a mere shadow of what it can be. It's even worse on the Outer Rim. It was time to see if we could convince these people to eventually back our vision for the future of the galaxy. The Long Way Home =RK Part 10 =RK Royal Palace, Theed, Naboo. Few hours of making additional deals and promises later, there was little immediately useful to show for. It was frustrating but not surprising. Too much of the future depended on what was happening in the core. We had no way of knowing details barring Satine's announcement of her becoming the Chancellor and calling off Order 66. While hyperdrives were an incredible capable piece of technology, their greatest strength was when they could be employed upon the hyperlanes. By using those, a starship could cross the galaxy in just a couple of days. In contrast, when flying away from them, simply passing through a territory as small as a sector could take a few weeks or months depending on the stellar cartography there and how often ships passed through and updated the charts. What that meant in practical terms was that with the Sis in control of the hyperlanes leading to the core and either capturing, destroying or jamming all Holonet stations between Naboo and there, the Republic was effectively cut to pieces. There was no way to communicate with the core bearing sending a ship or having available a stupidly overpowered transmitter that can blast its messages across most of the galaxy. There were few and far between and none in Republic control outside the core. There was also the little problem that the SIS was concentrating as many of their ships as possible between us and the core, which was the reason why we had to make our way to the eastern part of the galaxy before even thinking about making a dash for Republic space. All that left me in an interesting bargaining position. I could speak for myself and the Mandalorian people as Mandalore. I was the most senior Republic commander in the whole region, which helped too. What I couldn't do was negotiate for the Republic outside what the GAR needed to operate. Everything was made even more fun considering my aim was to undermine the Republic in the long run and replace it with something more sensible. That was the height of irony. After all, my initial goals was to see a reformed and militarized Republic prepare for the Vong once this war was over. However, my experiences with the Senate after returning to Coruscant as Mandalore were an eye-opening experience. There was no way to herd the Senate long-term in any way that would ultimately prove less trouble and work than going for Palpy's plan for an empire. That could have worked beautifully too, if the bloody Jedi didn't kill him and thus directly lead to the shenanigans I had to deal with ever since Kamino. In the end, it was me writing off the Republic as a viable future that led me to even entertaining Tarkin's plan for the Mid-Rim and the whole campaign. The most frustrating part about this whole mess was that a lot of the locals apparently had the weird notion that everything we did in the last few weeks in the region could somehow impact the war at large or even shorten it, which was patently ridiculous. Anything like that was never in the cards in the first place, but at least explaining that to the locals with infinite patience and as small words as it would take would be Tarkin's job. What made it so hard to comprehend that the ships the SIS had in the region would have never made a difference elsewhere? They would have either stood guard over the hyperlands and at their bases, thus keeping the Republic ships gathered at Naboo from leaving the area, or they would have continued their attacks, just as we found them doing when we first arrived here after Kamino. No matter what the SIS in the region did, by the time everything was resolved they either would have lost the bulk of their local forces while reducing our own or had to keep them here until the war at large was resolved. Even reducing Sullust's industry wouldn't be vital. The Separatists, as small as they were before their grand offensive, had hundreds if not thousands of worlds that rivaled its output. I should calm down. Dealing with that wasn't my problem, it was all Tarkin's, and I could enjoy the thought of him trying to explain that to the locals. I would be leaving soon, just after I visited the newest addition to Naboo's court, Ki-Adi-Mundi, who was guest to a reportedly very nice cell. Mundi's cell was indeed nice. Real nice, in fact. It resembled a more high-end guest suite instead of a place you would keep a supposed criminal. It had to be for holding high-value guests or royals suspected but not proven of doing any wrongdoing. General Vale. The tall Jedi gently bobbed his overly large head in a nod. Perhaps you can shed some light on the latest unpleasantries. Please, do have a seat. He waved at a nearby couch, an antique one made of carved wood and covered by expensive-looking embroidered cushions. Did I mention that the furniture was more suited for the Queen's own quarters than for any kind of cell? I can, at least in part, though I believe by now you're aware of the gist of it. I tried very hard to keep my tone amiable. By all accounts, Mundi got caught flat-footed by the coup and the consequent Order 66. See, the thing was, I found it hard to care. The Jedi messed up my plans for the future. Their stunt at Coruscant directly led to my actions at Kamino, and despite the dark side keeping my conscience in check, I was still bloody bitter about that, not to mention one of them nearly murdered my wife. Any goodwill I had about this era's Jedi, which came from my time before even stepping a foot in this universe, was very much gone by now. Deep in the dark corners of my mind, Shaak Ti's presence stirred when she figured out I was meeting another Jedi. She was both relieved and terrified when she figured out I hadn't made up my mind about what I was going to do with Mundi. Order 66. The coup. The old Jedi stated sadly. I'll admit I have no idea what the Council was thinking. Oh, it was clear what they thought: suffer no Sith to live. Considering they went after Palpy, they somehow figured it out and went out to get him, not as half-cocked as they did in the movies. They did manage to kill him after all, though how exactly they pulled that off I would never know. Perhaps I've been overestimating the man. I had no idea what was the last time he actually fought, but that might have very well been before he became a Chancellor. While the Force could help you keep yourself in top physical shape with little to no training to keep in shape, the same wasn't true for combat skills. Those were very much a perishable commodity. People tend to forget that one of the primary functions and policies of the Jedi were to eradicate the Sith, no matter what they said in public. Their history made that painfully clear, though they never put it that way officially. Officially, it was all preserving and protecting the Republic, this, policing Force sensitives for the good of all, that. True that. Aloud. The big question is what you knew about the Jedi coup, their treason. Not to mention the little issue of their assassination attempt on my person at Camino. I smiled at the man and it wasn't at all pleasant. Nothing whatsoever, Mundi declared. He might have even meant it, but at the end that was of little consequence about his fate. Even if it was true, the question that mattered was what now? RK equals. Part 11. RK equals. Royal Cells. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. Mundi sat in a comfortable-looking armchair with a serene smile on his face. It was like he had no worry in the world. Are you interested in the truth? I already told you. The Jedi Master spoke with an infuriating calmness. Oh, I'm very interested in it. My shark-like smile didn't waver. It's another question how much it has to do with what will happen. Refreshingly blunt, that's one of the few things I do like about you, Vale. Let me state it plainly for the record again, I had no idea what the Jedi Council planned, nor am I aware why they did it. Mundi's kind eyes focused on me. What now, General? That was an excellent question. The nasty thing was that I actually needed as many Jedi as I could trust on my side. Perian and company had been busy, their blitz on Camino was a proof of that. In the end I could be only at one place at a time and I would be hunting that bastard when the opportunity presented itself. I had no idea how many people he had trained to use the Force, nor how he had available. Then there were the Jedi who could have got away in the confusion following Order 66, both on Coruscant and across the galaxy at large. They were going to be trouble. I needed people able to use the Force I could reasonably trust, and right now that was only Obi-Wan, potentially Anakin and Arya, my remaining apprentice on Mandalore. The 4 Jedi I turned at Eriadu didn't really count. Sooner than later they will be more trouble than they were worth. I simply didn't have the time to groom Darksiders so they would remain reasonably sane and not turn on me in the near future. The moment Madoran declined to work with me, he sealed his fate. Mundi on the other hand was one of the more reasonable and open-minded Jedi of this era. Of course I believed the same was true about T, and look how that turned out. In the back of my head said woman snorted in derision. Now? I repeated. We're in an impasse it seems. What do you want, Master Mundi? A great many things, General, though I doubt you can offer any of them. How to play this? You know, the only reason Order 66 wasn't as bad as it could have been was General Valentra and me. The original text called for summary execution of all Jedi. I admitted. You knew of it? That revelation shook the serene smile off his face. Do you really think I would have taken command of the GAR without making damn sure I was aware of all the contingencies they had in place? I asked. To my surprise, Mundi actually looked thoughtful at my words. You've got to be kidding me, I exclaimed. Now it was beginning to make sense, but... Tell me you fools didn't? Look too close at the gift army we found ourselves commanding? There was an ongoing investigation, but it was a relatively low priority one. Most of us were too busy fighting the war. We knew about some contingency orders too. Mundi sighed and suddenly looked even older than his advanced age. Order 66. Dooku was a former Jedi in charge of the Confederacy. It made sense that there was a contingency in place in case a Jedi followed in his steps and no member of the Order was at hand to stop them. A Jedi coup forcing the Chancellor to give that order with his dying breath? That was inconceivable, especially that the clones would go after all Jedi once it was given. I'm still struggling with believing it, yet I've seen a record of that transmission with my own eyes. The same goes with the announcement of your sister-in-law becoming the new Chancellor, which confirms that Palpatine is either dead or not in a position to execute his duties. It was very much conceivable to me. The GAR was a Sith creature, their real purpose was to stab the Jedi in the back when Order 66 was given, everything else was secondary. As far as the Order's precise text go, it was all about neutralizing a Jedi-proven traitor to the Republic when I saw the text. Well, wasn't that curious? That wasn't exactly the one Valentra and I had to rewrite, though the gist was similar. It was another question that such a wording was open for interpretation even before you had indoctrinated clones to deal with. Further, my own command wasn't interested in capturing me but instead did their absolute best to kill me. That happens when you have an indoctrinated clone army meant to purge the Jedi when the order was given. I smiled wryly. Carefully mixing truth and lies might be for the best in this case. It wasn't like there was anyone left alive to contradict my narrative. I had a fascinating chat with Kamino's Prime Minister before Jedi Masters T and Rancisis tried to cut my head off. Is that so? Mundi's face was a calm mask that gave nothing. Even examining him through the Force was like looking at a calm, tightly controlled pool of light showing no clues of what he thought about. Whoever you had investigating must have asked the wrong questions. The clones were indoctrinated since before birth to follow orders, serve the Republic and most importantly, when Order 66 was given to wipe out the Jedi. You, my friend, got played long before this war began. By you? He inquired, still keeping this highly irritating calm mask on. I wasn't around for that stunt. Besides, it's too convoluted a plan for my taste. I shook my head. I would have acted in a more direct fashion if I had the Gar indoctrinated to follow my orders, complete with turning as many Jedi as possible before the first shot was fired. Perhaps even executing a direct strike on Coruscant to take out the Order if I could somehow hide my intentions from them. Once that was done, I could have taken my time subverting and dealing with the Republic. It would be worth it even if I lost the whole Gar in the process, which would have been unlikely to happen. Besides, I simply didn't have the patience and temperament to play Chancellor of the Republic for decades like Palpy did, which for all intents and purposes made the Benight Sith's plan non-viable as far as I was concerned. That much I can believe. He slowly inclined his head. Very conveniently all proof you have burned with Kamino, didn't it? That's true. However, the clones' actions when they got Order 66 speak for themselves. It is actually a matter of record that Valentra and I altered Order 66 to capture when practical. If he's still alive he can confirm my words too, but we got off topic, Master Mundi. Let us talk about the future. Mine in particular? It was my turn to nod. And that of the Jedi? The Order as it existed is gone for good. It would be a long, long time before anyone trusts the Jedi again. Which should have been a joyful thought, but I did need the bastards, damn it. I've seen it for myself. Mundi admitted. While there are some people who are friendly or at least neutral towards me here, a great many are hostile. This is Palpatine's home world. Say what you will about the man, but he was beloved not only on Naboo but across the whole Republic, I chuckled. Even if you found proof of something patently ridiculous, as if he was a Sith or as corrupt as most people in the Senate, most people either won't believe it or will make excuses for him. Where you consider the man's popularity, I wondered what would have happened in the original timeline if the Jedi somehow managed to off him in his office at the end of the Clone Wars. Somehow I found it hard to believe that the military and the citizenry at large would have bought any explanations of him being a traitor to the Republic. Palpy being a hidden Force adept, and that was all the Jedi knew at the time, one that wasn't a Jedi at that, was all they really had. If they failed to find a damn solid proof in his office, things would have turned ugly. Mundi grimaced at my words. Again, true. I'm old enough and I've been outside the Jedi Temple often enough to see that as a distinct possibility. Sometimes the ability of people to convince themselves what the truth is frankly astounding. Master Mundi, you said you liked my bluntness, so I'll be as clear as I can. When I found myself in the future, I was prepared to coexist with the Jedi. Those who engineered the murder of my first wife were long dead, or so I believed. The old Republic and Sith Empire were long gone, and to be honest, opposing you all would have been too much work for no real gain in the end. Besides, the supposed Sith leading the Confederation offended me. The thought of Dooku claiming to be a real Sith was still highly amusing, especially after I found the man captured by a bunch of pirates who managed to cut his arm off on camera no less. You made that much clear in the past. The Jedi coup on Coruscant changed everything. I let the Durasteel control I kept upon the dark side slip, and my eyes glowed sinisterly with her power. I felt Mace Windu nearly murder my wife at Coruscant. Mere hours later, Shaak Ti and Rancisis attempted to murder me at Kamino when I arrived with a fleet to reinforce them. Any goodwill or tolerance I had for this era's Jedi is gone. Fortunately for some of you, I found myself in the unpleasant position to find your kind necessary. Did Yoda brief you about Perion and his Old Republic remnant? Did someone told you about the Jedi the Separatists deployed at Kamino, or the weapon they used to mess up my battle meditation that led to that world burning? I've heard rumors but nothing concrete. So I told him my version of the truth, complete with camera footage from the survivors of the 501st. I had that prepared before heading down here once Tarkin informed me who had turned up on Naboo after I left for Sullust. That's concerning, Mundi admitted after he watched the recording. The situation has turned then. The Republic is backed by the Sith and the Separatists have Jedi to spearhead their campaigns. The irony wasn't lost to any of us. The only saving grace for you is that I don't want any more unhinged Darksiders running around. I already found a bunch of your people who had fallen after Order 66 came down on Ariadu. Those tickling time bombs are currently in orbit. Madoran and company. If Mundi decided to play ball, he was going to find about them sooner or later, and if I hid the fact that they had fallen to the dark side, that would undoubtedly bite me in the ass. As long as he didn't have proof that I was the one to turn them, I might be in the clear. Otherwise, well, I was playing quite a dangerous game with the man right now. While he was more useful alive and on my side, when all was said and done, if he decided to oppose me, he was going to die and I would have to face the fallout. Of course you had nothing to do with them falling. He didn't look particularly convinced. Nope. And we both know that even if they claim otherwise, that could be just Dark Jedi doing their best to create chaos. It is also true that no matter what the truth is, some would believe that I did it despite any evidence to the contrary, and others will see it as inevitable that they fell after the Jedi coup. We both know you can't have any evidence you didn't turn them. Mundi grimaced. True that, I agreed. May I point out I'm not actually trying to turn you? I already have an apprentice, and when we're back together I'll have my hands full with keeping her from going on the deep end, as a lot of dark side users tend to go. If you've paid any attention to my history, I had to deal with the Jedi I turned back in the Empire days. Keeping that little bundle of insanity from causing too much trouble was too much of a headache to ever want to turn another Jedi. Unless I intended to use them as cannon fodder, I wisely didn't add. I'm aware of the girl. The Order's version of events is quite different. Of course it is. I snorted. It figures that the Jedi's records and histories would paint them as saints and us as even bigger monsters than we were, if that was at all possible. What are your intentions towards the Jedi? Mundi asked. Everyone who took a part in the coup is going to die for treason. Even if I was inclined to, I won't waste any political capital on saving any of that bunch. Mace Windu dies when I get my hands on the bastard. That said, any Jedi who is not implicated in that nonsense and is ready to play ball will have a place in the military. I'm envision a deal similar to what Skywalker got. The Jedi will become a branch of the GA, your autonomy is gone for good. The same goes for most of you playing generals. For one, I won't trust you not to do something foolish with that much of an authority. On the bright side, Obi-Wan is in charge of the GA, so you people will usually be as far away from me as both of us can arrange. I needed any trustworthy Jedi in the field countering the ORR. It was a nice bonus that a lot of them were going to die in the process, saving me the headache. Minutes stretched as Mundi thought over my proposal. The Long Way Home =RK Part 12 =RK Royal Cells, Royal Palace, Theed, Naboo. If you told him a year and a half ago that he would find himself in such a situation, Adi Mundi wouldn't have believed it. He might have politely suggested that whoever did so seek medical assistance on, at least stop taking the obviously potent psychotropic substances they were high on. That was before Vale was unleashed upon the galaxy from whatever dark hole the Force stashed him for the last few thousand years. The Jedi Master still didn't know what to make of the ancient man. The Sith was vexing, nothing like his kind was supposed to be. Vale was usually reasonable, cultured. He made sense, sometimes more than certain members of the Jedi Council did. Vale's actions were highly dividing ever since that fateful day on Coruscant when the road to save the day during the Separatists' assault upon the Jedi Temple. Many, especially the younger ones, saw him as a hero. He offered a way free from the rules of the Order guiding their lives. More importantly, the Sith was a living, breathing example that you didn't really have to keep your emotions in check all the time or fall to the dark side, or so many claimed. After all, the man didn't act as the Jedi were taught a Darksider should. As far as too many were concerned, Vale's very existence proved that the Jedi Order's teachings were flawed. It didn't help that too many saw Mace Windu confront their savior just after the battle was over. It all went downhill from there. The Order grew more and more divided, its members, more radical and entrenched in their positions. Jedi began seeing a Sith Lord as the future, while to others, his very existence was enough to shatter the Order. From where he sat right now, Mundi could say that both sides were equally right and wrong. He didn't know what exactly happened on Coruscant. None of his friends deigned to inform him about the coup, and he had a lot of time lately to wonder if he was sent to the Rim because he was among the Jedi Masters willing to consider that the changes Vale's existence heralded might be for the better. It didn't help that he was sympathetic with Obi-Wan Kenobi's plight. He was a married man himself, and despite the fact it was heavily frowned upon, he did love his wives. He knew what the Order expected of him, to merely do his duty to his species, father children, and not form attachment to them nor to their mothers. He failed that decades ago and never really regretted it. Yet he did consider himself a good Jedi, and his record did support that notion, so it wasn't mere arrogance as he had been accused of at least a few times in the past. Mundi ceased his musings for a bit and refocused his attention to the Sith sitting in front of him. Vale had the dark side under control, and it was an impassive shadow to the Jedi's senses. He wondered if his slip earlier was genuine or a mere performance. That was the problem with the vexing man. No one knew what to make of him. While Mundi did believe that when he arrived to this time, Vale didn't want to see the Order destroyed as his kind was supposed to, what about now? He didn't know if it was true that Mace did wound the man's wife during the coup. Even if that happened, what about the circumstances? Did they even matter? As a Jedi, if something like that happened to one of his wives, Mundi wanted to believe that he would investigate and figure out who was at fault, what were the circumstances, before he took any action, unless of course someone was assaulting one of his wives in front of him. Vale, on the other hand, the man was a Sith and wasn't bound by the Jedi Master's own morality. Worse, the man already lost one wife to the Jedi in the past. For all Mundi knew, the only reason why he was still alive was because the Sith needed him. Ultimately, Vale's earlier words rang true, though probably not in the way he intended them. It was all about trust, true. However, could the Jedi ever trust him? Mundi, along with the other council members, spoke with Mace at length about why he confronted the Sith in the temple. They had to admit that his concerns were reasonable. None of them, with the possible exception of Yoda, could really tell what the man planned for the future. While Vale apparently didn't want to see the Jedi exterminated. He sighed. If you looked at Vale's actions from one angle, what he did was what one would expect from a Republic general. From another, they could easily fit the mold of a self-interested mercenary. Yet another point of view spoke of more sinister purpose. Vale's meteoric rise in the ranks of the Gar, perhaps that was simply inevitable if he was given the opportunity. After all, he was a battle-tested commander with decades of experience in a real war, or preparing for one as some claimed. Others saw quite differently. Vale got close to the Jedi he ran into all those months ago, Skywalker, Tano and even Kenobi. He wormed his way into the highest ranks of the military, and suddenly he was for all intents and purposes the Gar's supreme commander. Why did the man fight for the Republic? It certainly wasn't of the goodness of his heart, yet there were many officers who saw opportunity in the war, didn't really fight inspired by desire to protect the Republic, yet as far as their actions went, they did good work. Even that by itself didn't say much. People were complicated. Most weren't the paragons of virtue that the Jedi were supposed to be. They could be driven by raw ambition, yet sometimes their actions were still ultimately positive, especially if they were supervised. Could a Sith be held to the same standard ordinary people were? Could the Jedi judge Vale just by his actions and not his nature? Could they afford to? Mundi didn't really want to think about the debacle that was Vale's interaction with Master T, and while that was influential, the events at Geonosis and Mandalore would bring that issue in the spotlight in a dramatic fashion. When Geonosis happened, the answer of a large faction was a resounding no. A lot of that same group ultimately blamed Skywalker's actions on Vale's influence. The actions of the Sith on that world, his ruthless tactics, they were something that Obi-Wan himself protested. While it wasn't quite undiscriminating bombardment, the orbital strikes authorized by Vale led to hundreds of millions dying with billions as collateral damage when the full effects of hitting infrastructure hit the civilian population. Yet, too many people in the Gar argued that those strikes were necessary not only to make Republic military casualties on the ground acceptable but to ruin Geonosis' industrial potential and ability to rapidly shift troops and resources. As a Jedi, Mundi was horrified. As far as he and many of his peers were concerned, at Geonosis, the Republic military under Vail's command committed an atrocity as efficient and grave as anything Grievous did. Yet, Gar High Command, at least the non-Jedi there, closed ranks and claimed as one that while the loss of life was regrettable, every target struck by Republic orbital fire was a legitimate one. Worse, according to them, such atrocities were inevitable when you fought a modern war against a peer opponent if you wanted to break her ability to wage war. The only question was how you would achieve the result, through supplying enough orbital firepower or through even more bloody and protracted ground invasion that would ultimately kill more people when you took into account your own casualties. It was another question that the Republic simply lacked the numbers to do the necessary ground invasions again and would need to deal with most planetary industrial targets from orbit once planetary and theater shields were neutralized the hard way. Those events further divided the Order. A few Jedi agreed that the military did have a point, from their limited perspective at least, even if their conclusions were unacceptable. Such tactics, the atrocities that Gar claimed were necessary to win the war, that wasn't something the Jedi could condone. There were those who dismissed High Command's conclusions as born of the Sith corrupting them. Mandalore happened then, and that poured more fuel to the fires. Vail came back married and as Mandalore no less. The same was true for Obi-Wan Kenobi. The fallout sundered the Order to a point Mundi didn't believe could ever be repaired. Vail's detractors saw him finally showing his true colors openly. He had corrupted yet another Jedi. First Skywalker, the chosen one no less. Then he attempted to do the same to Shaak Ti and almost succeeded. As if that wasn't enough, he actually did succeed with Kenobi, and when they returned from Mandalore, Mundi's fellow Jedi Master returned not only married, but as a Mandalorian. The fallout. Jedi Masters confronting Vail in the Senate, the outrage of so many senators, the protests in support or against the Sith. How could Mundi did not doubt Vail's intentions? Was the man who and what he tried to present himself as? Was he merely an opportunistic general? Or was he a Sith who steadily but surely corrupt the Jedi, military and Republic government alike? Did it matter any more what Vail was before the coup? Mundi's comrades assassinated the Chancellor, and who else on Coruscant? Then, the dying Palpatine called Order 66 and thousands of Jedi died within the next few hours. What was left of the Order was either on the run, hunted by the whole Republic, or like him, in custody, awaiting judgment. That was not all, of course. If that was the case, things would have been too simple and straightforward. Camino had to happen. Vail's explanation was tentatively plausible. It could be true. Or the man could have lost it and wiped out that world under the influence of the dark side, though how and why the soldiers under his command would obey such an order was beyond Mundi. Unless somehow the Sith had corrupted them, which actually wasn't out of the question. Just a few short centuries before Vail's own time, Darth Revan did it when he fell to the dark side as he prepared to turn on the Republic and Jedi alike. Sullust followed, another atrocity that people defended as striking legitimate military targets. Mundi didn't know if something was wrong with those people or if it was that as a Jedi he was simply incapable of wrapping his head around the necessity of doing something so monstrous in order to win the war against the Separatists. That very doubt troubled him greatly. Just to top it all, Vail just admitted that he had a fellow Jedi Master and a few knights fallen to the dark side who were working for him. How could he trust a man responsible for the death of billions in this war alone? Even now, sitting face to face with the Sith, Mundi wasn't sure what to make of that man. Was Vail simply a man lost in time, criffing up in a criffed-up world? Was the Sith a victim of circumstances and the dark side's manipulation of events? Or perhaps he was the instigator of the chaos engulfing the Republic. Perhaps Vail really did his best to corrupt the likes of Skywalker, T, and Kenobi, and completely succeeded with Master Madoran. There was only one thing Mundi knew for sure: if he made a choice Vail didn't like, only one of them would leave this gilded cell alive, and he didn't particularly like his chances if Masters T and Rancisis really fought the Sith on Camino and he was here unscratched. How could he even think about working with a man who had killed at least two of his colleagues, one of whom was a friend? In the same time, if he played along he might live long enough to find out what really happened on Coruscant, what led to the coup, and find an opportunity to stop Vail if the man was as rotten as he suspected he might be. Yet, walking such a path risked him falling under the Sith's sway. While Mundi was an old and experienced Jedi, Obi-Wan was one of the best the Order had, yet he knew what happened with the man. What about Madoran? Was anything he could achieve working with Vale worth the risk of falling to the dark side? Was it worth risking being twisted enough to turn upon his comrades, and not only them but his wives and children? However, how could he not take such a risk? If he died in these cells, then for all he knew, his family might end up at the mercy of a Sith Lord who had none. Mundi looked at Vale, and despite all his years of experience and the calm presence of the Force, he fought a losing battle against his bubbling emotions. =RK= Part 13. =RK= Royal Cells. Royal Palace. Theed. Naboo. In the end, Mundi's peaceful facade cracked, and that came as a surprise to me. My previous interactions with the man, admittedly few and far between, didn't lead me to think that could happen without putting a significantly more pressure upon him. Perhaps there was something I didn't take into account, or it was just that the Jedi coup and its consequences for the Order had rattled him worse than it initially appeared. It wasn't like I actually attempted to force my way through his mental shields and check his mental state behind the facade he showed me. What I got from the Jedi was curious. While there was a bit of fear, I sensed no anger and a lot of worry. I found it highly unlikely that Mundi was afraid of dying here. What did that leave? Perhaps he thought I was lying my ass off and intended to turn him to the dark side. Not an unreasonable worry after I did with Madoran. Jedi. They were so bloody lucky that Palpy only wanted to turn his future apprentice, and only when he was about to end the game that was the Clone Wars he envisioned. If Sidious had taken a more conventional Sith approach, he could have wrecked the Order much earlier. The Jedi of this era, with them suppressing their emotions so much and avoiding knowledge of the dark side, were such a fertile ground for corruption if you knew what you were doing that it wasn't even funny. Yet, it was as if this whole conflict had been engineered to avoid that. The use of droids as the cannon fodder enemy for the Jedi, the clones, who while a nice tool to turn against the Jedi made the impact of losing men lesser than it could have been. It was much easier to send your soldiers to die when you either didn't care about how that would impact their families back home, or you didn't care about that. There was no such an issue with the bulk of the guard the Jedi had to interact with. Was that intentional? The Benites didn't want more Sith or Dark Jedi running around than absolutely necessary, yet there was that little group of Dooku fanboys and girls I had to dispatch since I came to the future. Interesting thoughts, but largely inconsequential with Sidious dead and Dooku kicked out of the Sith. I returned my full attention upon Mundi. His emotions spiked, then went down to almost nothing before rising up again. The vaunted Jedi stoicism was failing the man. What did concern him so much? Figuring that out would be important in determining if I could actually put him to some use or if I would be arranging an accident. I already had a bunch of Dark Jedi I had to look after. The last thing I needed was another. In the same vein, I wasn't going to keep Mundi around if he couldn't convince me that there was a reasonable chance he wasn't going to stab me in the back the moment it became convenient. Facing the fallout of executing him for treason would be less of a trouble than having to look behind my back for whatever shenanigans he might be up to. Nevertheless, I needed the bloody Jedi, damn him. Let's speak terms, Vale. What can convince you I'll follow your lead without sticking my lightsaber in your back? Mundi's emotions broke under a wave of steel determination. He apparently made up his mind about something and suddenly calmed down. The consequences for your person obviously won't stay your hand if you decide removing me would be for the best. I trailed off. Correct, was his serene response. I'm aware of the possibility that the GAR personnel in the area will do their best to tear me apart and likely succeed if I prove myself traitor in their eyes. Which him trying to kill me would be. That brought us back to an impasse. We couldn't really trust each other, for various good reasons. That by itself meant little. I've had to work under those conditions back in the Empire all the time, however. What really did make my current situation any different was the fact that Mundi was a Jedi. It was their kind who murdered Ashara, and it was Windu, one of Mundi's comrades, who almost did the same to Bo. Mundi likely trying to kill me wasn't the real issue. It was that I had a lot to hide lately. What happened at Kamino, the group of Jedi I turned at Ariadu, what I might do to any other Jedi we found in a position similar to Mundi's as we headed for the core. With him being around, my hands will be kinda tied as far as dispatching any Jedi who refuse to play ball. Doing so without proof they had anything to do with the coup will force me to remove Mundi then and there, making keeping him alive now a pointless gesture. That was it in the end. I still had to at least keep the appearance that I still operated in a way that the Republic might find acceptable and lawful. With Mundi around, I would actually have to make that a reality, not a polite fiction like what I did with Madoran and his friends. Decisions. Was keeping him around worth the headache and possibly an increasing number of particularly troublesome Jedi running around? While I did need them. No. I didn't need Jedi per se. I needed a proper counter to Perian's people, and that meant trained Force adepts. I needed weapons, however reliable ones, so that more or less disqualified a bunch of turned to the dark side brutes. As long as I had to operate under Republic rules, that would be problematic, or would it? Jedi, even those who didn't take part in their coup going on the deep end publicly, could actually be useful. Master Mundi. My lips twitched as I drew the power of the dark side within me. You know, you were among the few Jedi of this era that I actually liked. Open-minded, sensible. What had you so distressed? The temperature around is plummeted and shadows swallowed the bright lights shining from the ceiling. I can't say the same for you any longer. Mundi spoke calmly. Is this to be my execution? Perhaps. We do have a trust issues. I can't really be sure if you had part in the treason on Coruscant. In the same time, you can't be certain if your fears about me are founded or not. I spoke for any cameras and listening devices in the room, then surrounded us with the Force, making sure we would no longer be overheard. Do you want the truth, Master Jedi? I smiled. Mundi merely inclined his head a bit, a gesture with a lot of gravitas, despite that in no small part because of his huge head, though the serenity he radiated in the face of the dark side's presence around us did help. It wasn't until I became Mandalore and your people did your best to be a thorn in my side before I cared enough about you Jedi to begin plotting your downfall. I admitted. It was at the same time, when the Senate became too much of a bother, that decided that I had no more use of your precious Republic. Until then I was content to leave you play your little games, win your war and live my life once the Sith of this era were disposed of. I can't detect a deception in your words. Mundi admitted. Yet, nor can I believe any of those claims at face value. I have the same problem about you or any other Jedi with very few notable exception, I chuckled ruefully. Do you think that's how the ancient Jedi and the ancestors of my kind came to clash in the first place? No way to trust each other? Too much bad blood? It sounds plausible. Mundi allowed. I let the brief levity evaporate. Now answer my question, please. What's the point? I can't really trust you, Vale. Right now you're proving why that is. I am, aren't I? My smile died. I'm tired of playing games, Master Mundi. I'm tired of entertaining the pale shadows that pass for Jedi in this era. The same goes for your Republic. That admission was as much to Mundi as to myself. I was ready to let the past go, to live and let live, yet you just couldn't, could you? Me? If I could be sure you're telling the truth. Or were at any rate, back before the coup, Mundi sighed. Then I would have been glad to. Now? Who am I talking with right now? The same man who came to our aid when the temple was attacked? The man who turned a large part of Sullust into a graveyard? A Sith who lost himself to the dark side? Was it all a great lie to corrupt us all, Vale? Or did you just tell the truth? I can't tell. Nor can the other Jedi.